All right. So I'm going to do a video. You're going to watch this video. Everyone's going to walk away happy. How I work with editors. But before we get to that, I want to thank you for watching Armand's Opinion videos. I want to thank you for watching 30 seconds or more of each ad. I want to thank you for checking out the products I have listed under each video as well. Maybe there's something you like. Maybe there's a book. Maybe there's a specific coffee, whatever. I appreciate you clicking through. I appreciate all of the help. I appreciate the support. I really do. That being said, all of these videos, every video I'm doing is my opinion on things, hence the title, Armand's Opinion. For instance, an opinion right now, my glasses are filthy. I'm not editing this at all. All right. I also want to thank everybody for giving me ideas and suggestions for video topics about writing, about publishing, about whatever. Somebody gave me this idea. They're like, what? Talk about how working with editors. I'm like, you know what? I will. And I will remember your name and I will say your name on the video. Then I didn't write your name down. I forgot. So whoever you are that gave me this, and don't lie and say you gave it to me, because if you didn't, you didn't. But anyway, I appreciate you giving me this idea for a video. That being said, let's chat. Okay. So 38 years I've been in this business, 15 years as a full-time author. I have worked with a lot of small presses, okay? I have an editor that I've worked with for 15 years, probably almost 15 years, and she mostly just works with my stuff. From time to time, she'll work with other people. Mostly it's going to be just my stuff, which I appreciate. And that being said, I've worked with a ton of small presses, and I've worked with other editors. Some really good editors, some really not so good editors. I had an editor years ago who literally changed every comma, basically deleted almost every comma in like every sentence that needed a comma, where there were several ideas. And I didn't understand what we were doing there. I also had another editor one time who changed the all of my dialogue to where there were no quotation marks. And I'm like, I'm not writing The Road by McCarthy. You know, that didn't have that. We're not doing some fun little exercise here thing. It needs dialogue quotes. So I'm just going to send you this was for a publisher. I'm just going to send you my original file again, and then we're going to leave those alone. And I found out from the publisher afterwards that they had done this on 3 or 4 other books, this editor, at the same time. And a couple of the people were like, okay, I think if you know better, and they agreed to it. And then the publisher had to basically fire that editor and then find another editor. So by that point, I was like, yeah, we're not doing this. You know, weird things. Sometimes, so I talk about beta readers, and I talk about editors. I talk about that I don't want another writer to critique my stuff, because another writer will figure out how they would have written it, how they would have presented ideas and whatnot. And I don't need that. I don't want your ideas. I have my own ideas. Okay. So I don't want you to explain to me what you would have done in this situation, because then, then my thing is, then write your own book. Then go and write your own thing. So sometimes, especially small presses, they will have an editor that is also a writer, making an extra couple bucks or something. They figure, well, I'm a writer, so I can be a good editor. No, sometimes you cannot. And for me, that presents a problem. It presents a problem because I like to write a very clean first draft, but there's going to be typos. There's going to be some problems. I get it. I'm not that egotistical. We're going to have some back and forth. We're going to have some editing. 100% get that. But when you start coming up with some really weird things, I had a book once where they didn't like the main character. The editor was like, you know what, this character would be better. So it was I'm not going to say which book. It was a horror book. The main character was female. And they said, no, you're a male, so your main character has to be a male. Now, you also don't have any gay characters in this book. So let's make him a gay male, rewrite the book basically as he's a gay male going through this, and then we can, so you can still have the dating, any of the dating or any of those parts where the main character who was a female likes a male character. And I said, no. I immediately sent the small press, the guy who ran the small press, I sent him a message. I'm like, are you aware of this? Are you okay with this? Because that's not why we signed a contract. Like, I signed a contract because you liked my book. And they were like, I don't even know what you're even talking about. And again, this is an editor who had done this to 2 or 3 other people at the same time. So yeah, I'm not going to do that. Now, if you give me some suggestions, hey, this subplot is going nowhere. Hey, you've written two minor characters here. You could combine it into one character. I have no problem with that. If it makes the story, genuinely makes the story better, I'm in. I want it to be the best story possible. I would rather that one person, that editor, dislikes something enough and that it makes sense. And I say, you know what, I'd rather this than potential millions of readers out there that are not going to like what I'm doing. And they're going to give me, 1-star review on it or something. So I have no problem with that. You check your ego at the door when you're doing this stuff. Only one time in my career have I actually walked away from a book and then I just self-published it afterward because I didn't agree with their editor. And basically the small press, the guy who ran the thing was basically like, well, this whatever they say goes kind of thing. And I'm not going to say the book or the publisher or anything, because then I realized after the fact that the guy running the publishing thing and the woman who was editing, they were boyfriend and girlfriend, which is literally the only reason she was the editor on their books. It's a press that's not even around anymore, I don't believe. But, you get stuff like that all the time. Most of the time, I would say 85% of the time, I have no problem with the edits. A lot of times it's like, here's the edits, go through track changes, anything you agree with, change, anything you don't, leave. And for the most part, I'm okay on most of the stuff. And so there's never going to be that big problem there. Okay. I had a book I wrote years ago, Chelsea Avenue. I started it years ago and I gave it to a fellow writer. And he basically was like, there's too many characters. He basically ripped it apart. And he was kind of a jerk about it. Just the way he was, his notes were very condescending, like, basically, this is not a good book, and here's the 30 reasons why. Okay. At the time, it wasn't a good book. It took me 15 years to finally write that book, that I was comfortable with that book. So I get that. But I at that point, I was like, why am I having other writers read my books? Because, of course, I would have done this with this character. I would have done this with this character. I would have done this with the timeline. Wouldn't this be more fascinating? That kind of thing. No, none of that would have been more fascinating. And I stuck to the main skeleton of the book. And I wrote that and ended up being a trilogy, and I ended up doing fairly well. So, you know who you are. For the most part, I like working with editors because they love books. They love the things they do. So now I just turned in, as I'm recording this, I just turned in my 12th and likely final book with Severed Press. And I've had a great time working with their editors. I think it's 2 or 3 different editors, it seems like I've worked with. And I enjoy the process because they're quick. There's not a ton of notes. There's typos. There's, should this word be capitalized? What does this sentence mean? Do you mean this? Let's tighten this prose up kind of thing. I like all that. I got no problem with that. 30,000 words, and I have like 15 issues with a book. I'm fine with that. We knocked those out pretty quick because, again, I'm writing a pretty clean first draft. I know where I'm going with it. There's always going to be problems, and I'm sure there's still problems. I'm sure if you open up any of those, if I pull a book right now from my shelf and open it up, I'm going to find a typo. And that's just human nature, common sense, law of the land. But I want to have the best book out possible. We all do. All of us writers want to. And I think when you find an editor that you can work with, when you find an editor that understands, and you're just going to, there's going to be growing pains in the beginning. They're going to throw a couple things, and I think a new editor tends to overdo it, and they feel like, well, I want to, earn my money, so I'm going to basically beat every single page up, and I'm going to question every single thing and word choices and on and on. I had an editor years and years ago who wanted to use big fancy words in place of normal words. And so, well, instead of, he opened the door, why shouldn't this be? He opened it in like some kind of specific door count kind of thing. You know what I mean? like, no, they don't need to be these elaborate French doors. It has nothing to do with the story. He walked through the door. That's what he did. The curtains are blue because that's the color I picked. We're not going to get into all this other stuff. I'm writing pulp fiction here, people. So that's kind of the way I look at it. I look at it and I say, I want to be comfortable with the story. I want to, at the end of the day, I got 200 books on the shelf behind me that I've written or I've had a story in. I want to be comfortable enough that any of these books are readable. Any of these books are going to be exciting for somebody to read. I'm going to be proud of. I want to know that I'm proud of these books. Okay, there's other things that maybe I'm not so proud of. Covers, which I'll do another video, I'm sure, at some point about my favorite and my least favorite covers, that kind of thing. But overall, I'm going to be happy with this book, especially if I'm working with a new editor. I want to kind of set the ground rules, because a lot of times you work with a publisher and they just you hand them, here's my book, and then a week later, however long, here's edits back. I don't know who this editor is. Sometimes there's not even a name attached to it. I don't know if it's the publisher, the guy running the place does his own editing. I don't know. But I want to kind of get a rapport with this editor so they understand where I'm coming from. I'm going to make the same mistakes all the time. My main editor for all of my self-published stuff, and I think I've talked about this in another video. Since I was a kid, instead of saying, "Oh, let's pretend that I'm good looking." I mean, I'm good looking, but I say, let's make pretend that we're good looking instead of let's pretend on something. And I write that as well, make pretend. In fact, my first short story collection is make pretend. And so she would call me on it all the time. And I couldn't help it. And for some reason, I wrote that in a lot of books. So something like that, it's you work with the person over and over, and they kind of know hey, you're using that a lot. Hey, you have pages of dialogue where he said, she said, he said, she said, he said, she said. There's no action. There's no, it's everything is, what do you think? Bob asked. I don't know, she said. I'm going to go and do this, Bob said. Blah, 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 she said. And it's that. And as I'm just writing, I'm not realizing, instead of, hey, let's break this up a little bit. Maybe somebody take a sip of coffee or something. Maybe somebody shoot a bird. I don't know. Do something. Do some kind of movement, some kind of action other than said, asked, said. So that's what the editor's for sometimes. The editor for me is like, you know what, I'm going to, it's almost like I'm going to leave those. I'm going to throw those in. I'm going to see if they notice. If this is the first time I'm working with an editor. Okay. And I know it's there. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to change it anyway. And I think that's an important part of the process, or as I like to say, the process of what we're doing. So that being said, that's how I generally work with this. I don't have a big problem. You just got to get to know the person. They have to get to know you. It always helps if I'm getting, at times I've had the same editor through a company, or they've moved to another, or they work with multiple companies. And when I like, this editor has been assigned to you, and I'm like, oh, I like this person. Okay. They hopefully understand what's going on here. And most of the time, like I said, 85% of the time, I'm enjoying what I'm doing. The same thing with short stories or flash fiction. I don't want a heavy-handed person who goes, well, it's 1,500 word story, and I'm gonna mark this up 300 words worth of stuff on it. I don't need that. I did a story maybe 2-3 years ago. The limit was 5,000 words. I wrote like a 4,800 word short story. Sent it in. It was accepted. You're going to get an edit on it. And the edit was, the editor, some of it was like, well, let's add to this. I think you need to do this with this character on it. And I'm like, if I did all the 6 or 7 changes in this story, this would be about a 7,500 word or more story. So am I allowed to? Am I going to be wasting my time? Am I allowed to do that? Will the publisher accept this if it's 2,000-3,000 words over the top limit before I do anything? And then I got a message back about 4 or 5 days later, and it said, all right, here's a new version of it. Yeah, we can't go over 5,000 words. I'm like, exactly. But I would have done all that work, and then the publisher would have come back and said, yeah, we can't use this story anymore because it went over. So let's cut all the things that you just wasted the last few days reworking. So, there's lessons in everything, right? Listen, if you have any ideas for me to do these videos, please ask. I'm going to give you my opinion. I'm not doing videos where like this is what you need to do and blah blah. This is what I do. These are the things that I work on. These are the things that I do, and that's kind of the reason I'm going to do these every Wednesday, every Sunday. I do these, and I hope you watch them. I hope you watch 30 seconds or more of the advertising put in there. I hope you check out the products that I have listed in there, because hey, I'm here. I'm having fun doing this, but I'm also here to make money. I'm also here to let's be honest. This is my job. My job is to amuse you enough that you spend money. And you know what? Watching an ad not costing you anything, but it's helping me. So help me out, people. Help me out. Thanks for hitting the subscribe button as well. Thanks for sharing these videos with other people that might be interested as well. So, all right. Again, every Wednesday, every Sunday, one of these videos will drop. Occasionally on a Friday, I have a lot of videos to still shoot, but I kind of pick and choose what's kind of what hits me. So if you have any ideas, feel free to message me. Feel free to just drop a comment on the YouTube video and go, hey, I got another question for you. And I would be happy, more than happy, to put it on the list. All right, people. Thank you very much.